to the Burnout to Abundance series. I'm your host, Dr. Grace Sha. Today, I have Stevie Brown with me, who is a professional marketer, coach, and CEO of The Change Starter, a boutique marketing consultancy that builds result-focused marketing for established businesses committed to long-term growth. Welcome, Stevie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Stevie, we obviously know a little bit about each other, but if you can tell our listeners in 1 minute, how would you usually introduce yourself when you meet someone new?
Sure can. Hi everyone. I'm Stevie, and as you can probably tell, I was born in the UK and live here in Australia for about 15 years now, I think. Yes, I'm a marketeer. I've been in the advertising and marketing industry for over 20 years, and started my career in London at some big ad agencies. Worked on many global brands across a whole different range of marketing channels, and now, as Grace said, I have a boutique marketing consultancy, and so we work with small business that are at that stage of growth where they just really need to take that marketing hat off their head and give it over to somebody else, and that's the main job that we do. We build an outsourced marketing team for them, and help them to market and grow their business.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your business as we chat as well. But first of all, tell us about your burnout story and what stage of life you were at when that happened.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's kind of happened to me a few times in my life, but I think like the main one was it's happened before I started my business, before I was, a business owner and I was an employee. So in the last job that I had before I started my business was when things, really got bad. And I think essentially there were a number of different triggers. So we were working very long hours for starters in that business, and that's fairly typical in my industry. It is quite stressful. It is quite long hours, but there were quite a lot of extremes of the stress that we were all under as a team. And then I'd been working there for quite a few years, but then what happened was the business was sold to a bigger group, and we had a change of management. And so, the people I knew really well who owned the business and I'd worked with and had a good relationship, they were leaving the business, and we got someone else in, and, it just kind of went bad from there for a lot of people's experience. So the experience I was having was terrible. He was a bully. He was quite, he was quite disruptive, quite narcissistic. And it literally became that I felt like I had gone crazy. Like I felt like I was the crazy person, because he was gaslighting and he was bullying, and he was doing it not only to me, but to others too. But unfortunately, I was right in his line of fire because of the position that I was in the business. So I was in a very senior role and sort of, running, it wasn't really a department, but running a certain, vertical in the business that he was very much involved with. And so I was reporting directly into him, and it was just extremely stressful. And then on top of that, we had to physically move offices, and everyone was still doing the work while we were moving offices. And he was there as the new manager, but he really wasn't or the new head of the business. He really wasn't managing everything. So he was just leaving us all to deal with it. Everyone was like crying and stressed, and it was just awful. And so we had to then move office. We had to deal with going into a new environment. And for me, it was terrible because it was one of those awful open plan offices where you don't have a real desk. So you have to put your stuff in a locker at the end of the day. And then the next day you come and you have to find a desk to be at and put your stuff back out again. And the noise, and, for me, I'm very sensitive to noise. So I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't perform. So with all these things going on around me and this experience, it just got to a point where I wasn't performing properly, but I didn't really know that I wasn't performing properly. I can see that, like, looking back now. I couldn't get through my day. I couldn't breathe properly. The anxiety was at an all-time high. I remember sitting one day, I remember there was kind of like this area between, there was like the lockers, and there was like this area between where you didn't really go. And it was sort of private, I suppose. It was just sort of covered. And I remember just going in there just to get away, try to get away from the environment. I remember sitting there just crying and being like, how do I get out of here? Like, how do I get away? And, you might say, well, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just quit your job? And I think the answer was because I was stuck in, what we called visa prison, where I was waiting for a permanent residency to come through, and it hadn't come through yet. And I kept calling immigration, like, when is this going to come through? And so because I was sponsored by the business, I couldn't leave, because if I did, I was going to mess that whole application up. We'd have to start again, and I wouldn't be able to start my business, which I knew I wanted to do. And I was already trying to plan to do that. So I was kind of stuck, like, in every which way. And I couldn't just quit my job. So I felt completely powerless. I felt completely stuck. I felt just blocked. And I was just sitting there. And I remember just feeling like I was almost having a panic. I think it was kind of like a panic attack. And I do have panic attacks, but it wasn't quite the same as that. I was just like, I just felt, I can't really, it's almost like a zombie. That's the only way I can explain it. I felt like a zombie, and I felt completely like alone. And I think that was like, I felt totally isolated, because I felt like people, even though people knew I wasn't having a good experience, I don't feel like they understood exactly what I was going through, and just how badly this person was, affecting me, and how stressed I was. And I asked to take some time off, and he seemed surprised that I wanted to take a holiday, which in itself felt like a bit of gaslighting. It was like, oh, really? You need some time off? Like that was a strange request or something. And I took a week off, but I needed 3 months off. Like, I took a week, and I was like, it was such a relief to get out of there. But it was just nowhere near enough of a break. And I felt slightly better when I came back, but not enough better. And so every day, was just not sleeping properly, then working really long hours. So even more tired, feeling even more stressed, not getting through my workload at all, and just feeling completely isolated and alone and unable to get out of my situation. And then, he started to try and say that I wasn't performing, and that my behavior was wrong. I was doing, like, my behavior was bad, and, started basically treating me like I was a child or something. And then, sent me to, got HR involved, and said that I was, behaving really badly and all of this. And I was like, my behavior is a direct result of the experience I'm having in this workplace, and it was just, but I wasn't in a position to fight back. I couldn't fight back, because I was too weak. I didn't even really realize what was happening to me. It was so bad. So it was almost like you realize too late. And then by the time you realize that this is happening, you're already in it. It's too late. And then you don't have the tools or the resource within yourself to get out or deal with the situation. So that was kind of the bad part of it. And then, ultimately I did get out, and I quit the job. I got the visa came through. I was so relieved. I quit the job. I got out, and then I was able to start to move on from that experience. But the problem was that I didn't know that I was still really burnt out, even though I'd left the job. So the effects continued. So, and that kind of took me into the next stage of what happened.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And you did cover a lot of like actually recognizing some of the symptoms that weren't right, and that awareness or the hindsight that, what do I need to do to actually stop myself from burning out? So when you actually realize, even after you quit the job, that you were still having those symptoms of burnout, like what did you do then about it?
Well, I guess it was a process of realization in hindsight. I think even though I knew I wasn't feeling good when it was happening, I didn't really know what it was. And then when I thought it was just the situation. And then when I left, and I was still like, I don't feel good, and I don't feel strong, and I don't feel confident. And that was I'd lost my confidence, and I was trying to start a business, and you can't start a business if you don't have any confidence, right?
Yes.
That's a really big problem. If you're a business owner, you have to be confident, and you have to be strong, and you have to be brave, and you have to do all these things. So it was really challenging, because I obviously needed to get the business going to make money and be able to live. And, when you start, you don't have very much. So it's actually about paying the bills. And so and then at the same time, I was going through, I think, a process of realization of what had happened and what I had gone through, and not fully understanding what it was, and still knowing that I had, challenges. And then I kind of started to have like flashbacks of the situation that I'd had, and that was making things even worse. So it was really hard at the time. And I don't remember exactly taking any specific, positive action, because I don't think I was still in a place where I could realize that I needed to go and do that. But as that year went on, I actually ended up taking just a freelance role at some point in the year, because I wasn't getting on very well starting my business, and clearly because I'm suffering these, consequences. So I took this freelance role, and then I got back into a workplace by doing that. And that was actually a really good thing, because everyone there was really lovely, and it got on very well with them. And so I didn't get that same experience again. And I think if you didn't, it then teaches you, oh, I didn't repeat the experience. So it's not every workplace, and it's not every set of people, and it's not every situation that's going to cause this. So I think that was really helpful. And then I also went and I did a lot of Tony Robbins stuff as well. So I did like the Firewalk, and went to a lot of his events and got really into that. And that actually really helped to pull me out of it as well. So it was a lot of work was done around that as well.
Yes. So actually doing some personal growth and forming awareness of why you were doing the things that you were, or why were you feeling those things. So what are some major lessons that you learned from that challenging period of your life?
Well, I think one of the key things was about, when you've gone through that, then you can recognize the symptoms if they start to happen again. So the positive has been that when I've had situations since that, running my business, which is also stressful, of course, is that I can now recognize if those sets of symptoms are starting to come, and I'm getting to a point where, and I think one of the main symptoms, which I didn't really mention before, but I talked about my behavior. I was so angry, and I was frustrated, and I was just irritable the entire time. I was furious the entire time. And when I start to see myself getting like that, and I start to think I'm getting really frustrated about simple things, that's now something I can go, hang on, okay, what's happening here? So you can actually sort of take a breath and stop and take a step back and say, what do I need to do now? What's happening? Are we going down that road again? Because we're never going to go down that road again. That's the rule, right, that you set for yourself. So I think that's one thing. And then the other thing is just, what are the ways that I can take what happened and make sure that doesn't happen to other people? And so, for me now, because I have a team of people, we have, my goal is to make sure the workplace is that they are working in, and the environment, or the work, we call it the work environment because we work remotely. So everyone has their own workplace, and then it's the environment we create and the culture that we have around that. So the values and the culture is like super important for me. And if we don't have that in place, then people are not going to have a great experience. So it's now led to me saying, right, how do we create the best experience for the people that are going to work with us? And and we ran an NPS, a Net Promoter Score survey, and we got a score of 100 for our partnerships that we have with our partners that we use to implement the various marketing services. And that's because I've worked really hard at putting the values in, and setting the tone, and setting the behaviors and the standards that we work to, and how we treat each other in that environment, and making sure there are policies in place for that, and also things in place for conflict resolution in the workplace, and how everybody needs to be accountable, and how we operate in that regard. And I won't have people talking about other people in our business. We don't work like that. I mean, inevitably in a conversation, you talk about each other, but what I mean is that if there's a problem, we talk about the workflow around the problem. What is the workflow that's gone wrong here? How have we not communicated well with each other such that this problem has happened? It's never about, well, so-and-so said this and they did that, and therefore this. We try to avoid that kind of discussion, and really focus on, what is it that we haven't done well enough if things are not going how they should have gone. And that's been that's come from that learning, is that system has come from that learning of making sure that everyone has a great experience.
And I run workshops for health professionals for workplace relationship, and I actually say that, like, blame the system, not the person, because I think oftentimes people like to finger point, but it's about, like, what's the goal here? Like, are we actually going to achieve anything by blaming each other, or can we do better to serve our clients better?
And we actually have like our culture is about accountability, and you know, everyone that works in the business we're all adults, so we need to be accountable. And you know, what I say is that accountability is, you know, I think you have to kind of get to a level of understanding of this, but essentially, you know, I don't want a blame culture, but what I do want to do is have people say, oh, I made a mistake. So put my hand up and I made a mistake, or I got this wrong, or I should have just done this a bit differently, and if I'd done this way, it would have been better. That's never about a witch hunt or blaming somebody. It's about saying what happened systematically here that wasn't quite right. And yes, there's people's actions and behaviors that affect whether a system runs well or not. But, you know, my encouragement to people is always just say, yeah, actually, you know what, I realize I should have done this a little bit differently, and then that wouldn't have happened. That's fine. Then it's like, what did you learn from that? How do we move on from it? How do we make sure it doesn't happen like that again? What do we need to change in the workflow so that we can ensure that, you know, we've got a better system for the future? And so that's the important thing. And I think, you know, the experience I came from was not like that. It was about blame, and it was about not working as a team. And there was no accountability, certainly from the so-called leadership at the top. And, you know, it's leadership is something I'm passionate about, because leadership is so poor globally, and it's poor in Australia very much. I mean, there's plenty of studies out there about that fact. And I think, you know, leaders need to be much more accountable, but individuals need to be accountable too. And I think we all want this. Everyone wants empowerment, but what that means is what they think they mean by that is that they just want freedom to do whatever they want when they want. But you know, empowerment comes with consequences. If you're going to be empowered to do something, you have to then also be in charge of the consequences. And for me, that's the total aspect of, you know, accountability. So if you have accountability, and if I am accountable as a leader, and I teach others to be accountable, in my team, and even also with our clients as well, that then we all have a much better experience. In my experience, we have a better experience.
So knowing what you can control, but also like when you have a mistake, you actually own up to it and have this open and honest communication with no fear of really negative consequences, isn't it?
That's exactly right. Exactly. I think it's so important, because otherwise you're breeding a culture of fear. And when you have fear, that's when people do start to behave differently and negatively, because they're scared, they're fearful. They're fearful of losing their job, or they're fearful of getting in trouble in some way, or being told off, or what, you know, whatever it may be, whatever the consequences might be. They're fearful of negative consequences if they think that, you know, those are not going to come with a smile. You know, and I think that's and I think that's really important.
And you touched a little bit on this. Obviously, your team now is very blessed to have you as a boss, but what are some blessings that have come out from your burnout?
So for me, it's just about feeling that I'm in charge of myself now, not somebody else. And, you know, I am quite literally, because I'm a business owner, and that's a great feeling to have. And understanding and setting boundaries about my availability, because I think one of the things that can really drive burnout is when you're just being pulled in so many directions by so many different layers of things that are happening. And if people are contributing to that, then the people so sometimes people are contributing to that because they're trying to get their job done, and they need answers from you, right? Or they want to help you. But sometimes if there's too much happening, that can be too much for you to cope with. And so for me, it's about saying, here's my boundary around that. So it's about saying, okay, yes, I am going to take a holiday, and no, you're not going to be able to contact me while I'm on holiday, right? Because people are just like, it's great, so you'll be away, so how do we get in touch with you? You don't. See you later. You know, so I think that kind of, as soon as you let people in, they will take and take and take and take, and they will suck the life out of you. So you have to be really clear about that. So now, you know, I'm very much with my team, I'll say, okay, guys, I'm not going to be online this morning until, you know, I'll be offline in this period of time, and then you'll be able to contact me after this time. In other words, I don't want to see your messages. I don't want to see your emails. I don't want any communication from you during this time period, because I need that time for something else, whatever that may be, whether it's personal or whether it's just business thinking time or concentrating on something. That's my time that I've allocated. And nothing is so urgent that you're going to, for 4 hours, let's say, you can't, cope. Right? If something terrible happens, just wait until I come out of that period of time and then talk to me about it. Like, it's not going to be that bad. It's just marketing. So it's like,
no one's dying.
Right? Nobody's going to die. So it's going to be all right. So, and I often use that phrase to my team. I say, don't get in touch with me unless someone dies. Like, quite literally, I just don't need to, it's not that important or urgent that it can't wait for a little bit longer. And it's not like there's something else you can't be doing in the meantime if you're waiting, for me to answer you on something.
And oftentimes, probably by the time they need to contact you, they've probably worked out how to solve a lot of the issues already.
That's such an important point as well, because honestly, do they really need me? Because you're right. A lot of the time, no, probably not. And, and that's actually so important for, I think, for leaders as well, is like, if you answer, I suppose it's just like a child. If you answer every single question they ever have, or you attend to every need that they express, well, they're just going to learn that, every time they ask for something, they get it. And so it's the same with your team to a degree, even though they're not babies and children, they're adults, but it's easy for them to come to the person who is going to know all the answers to all the questions as the business leader. And it's easier to come to them and say, well, what should I do about this, instead of thinking about it themselves. So, I often go back to my team and say, well, what do you think you should do about it? Come to me with an answer, with a solution, with some options, and then we can talk about it a little bit further. Yes. And I think it's, again, that comes back to the empowerment as well. And then, but them having to think about, what are the consequences of my options here? Because I need to be accountable for ultimately what we decide to do about any given situation.
Yes, that's correct. So you've talked a bit about how you prevent workplace burnout. Is there anything else you sort of do for yourself as preventive strategies to make sure you have a balanced life?
I just try to get out and I try to take time out, but I tend to be someone that I don't tend to do lots of things during the week, like social activities or whatever. I tend to save up for a bigger event. So I'll go for, time away, a weekend away or a week away, because I love to go away and travel and, go and stay somewhere nice in a hotel or whatever. And that's kind of my time. That's how I get back my time, and that's how I relax and have something to look forward to. So for me, I prefer to do that in chunks and, than doing like lots of little things. But, I just have very small things that I do. Like, I have a little nice, in my house, I have like a little courtyard area, and it's very peaceful and nobody can see me. It's like a little cocoon for me. And I'll just go in there, and even just if I go in there and sit for half an hour and just sit with a cup of tea and, just with myself rather than anything else, not looking at emails, not looking at messages. That's a really important time and space for me to have and to give myself. And then I just try to give myself, nice things. Like, I bought myself a fancy bed that sits up with a remote control, and but just that in itself is like a little luxury that is just, for me to enjoy and relax on, and, have a good sleep on. And sleep's really important, obviously.
Yes.
So small things like that, to be honest. And then just setting those clear boundaries for me.
Knowing how to
in personal life as well, right?
Yes.
You've got to have that as well, and be clear with people when you're available, when you're not available, what you can do for them, what you can't do for them. And I have friendships where, I will say, we'll have a conversation and I'll sort of say, look, what do you need from me right now? Because I'm actually kind of in this space at the moment. My head's really full. I've got a lot going on, so I haven't got that much to give right now. Do you need me right now? Can we maybe have a conversation next week? How can I best help you? And I think it's better to have that open conversation. And then someone says, oh, you know what? It's not that urgent. I'm okay. Why don't we talk next week when your stress is over, and then then I can help them better. So even in like those personal friendships, it's like, setting clarity around, what you can and can't offer people essentially at any given time.
Yeah, I think honest communication and self-care is all very important, whether it's work or personal life. So if you were looking back at your younger self, what's sort of the top 3 tips you would give her?
I definitely say, don't be so afraid to stand up for yourself, and speak up sooner if something doesn't feel right or doesn't seem right. And I would say, you don't have to say yes to everything. It's okay to say no to stuff. You don't need to help everybody. And yeah, I mean, I think those, and then just, I probably also say, don't work as much, or at least take more breaks, you know?
Yeah, no, those are all very good tips. So how would someone get in touch with you if they needed some marketing help from a team who's not burnt out, Stevie?
They're all so happy. They can't wait to do your marketing for you. So the business is called The Change Starter. So you can find us at thechangestarter.com. And I do also have, when I go on podcasts, I've got a little freebie page. So if you go to thechangestarter.com/podcast gifts, and we've got a quiz on there. You can find out about your marketing, what's happening with your marketing, what's going right, what's going well in terms of the relationship you have with your marketing, which is a really important aspect. People think it's all about whether they should run ads or send out emails, but there's actually a lot to do with your mindset and your attitude around your marketing function. So that quiz kind of helps you get into that in a little bit more depth. And then you'll find my book on there as well, linked to my book, which is also about a model called the Care Factor Fix, which is commitment, accountability, realism, and engagement, which are the 4 values of our business, but they're also the 4 factors that we know help people have success when they work with a marketing provider. So a couple of little gifts on there. And I think also you'll get a pop-up for my marketing mini course on marketing strategy. So go and have fun with that if marketing is something that's on people's minds.
Wonderful. I'll definitely drop those links below the episode as well. Thank you so much. I loved talking to you, Stevie.
Thanks, Grace. It's been great to be on.